Good afternoon, members of the committee, members of the media, invited guests that are here assembled. I hereby call the meeting of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on the Public Accounts on today, the 26th of May, to order. There are only two specific agenda items on our agenda for today. The first is the Financial Secretary, who has joined us today. We're appreciative of his presence, and he will be discussing with the committee compliance procedures for financial instructions, which were previously requested by the Public Accounts Committee, in addition to the Public Accounts Committee's outstanding requests for the Airport Development Agreement and schedules. As we all know, that Parliament has been provided with the Airport Development Agreement. However, the Public Accounts Committee has asked for the schedules, which have not yet been provided by the government. Following the testimony from the Financial Secretary, we're expecting the Honorable Derek V. Burgess, JPMP, and he would like to address the committee regarding the report of the Auditor General for the financial years ending March 31st, 2010, 2011, and 2012. And that meeting and his appearance is scheduled at 3:30 p.m. The second item on our agenda is the confirmation of minutes from our last meeting, and those minutes will be deferred. And so we'll move directly to the next item on our agenda, which is the Financial Secretary. And as I previously stated, he is here to discuss the compliance procedure for financial instructions and the Airport Development Agreement and their schedules. Greetings, Mr. Financial Secretary.
Greetings.
Thank you for joining us today. I understand that, of course, that you've been laid up a little bit, and as members of the public can see, you're on the mend. I'll put it that way. Before we move on to compliance procedures for financial instructions, of course, I'll ask the obligatory question as to whether or not complying with the Public Accounts Committee's requests of November 2015, whether or not you have the schedules for the Airport Development Agreement for the members of the Public Accounts Committee.
As I previously indicated through letters to the Public Accounts Committee, I personally don't have the authority to release the schedules. I laid it out in my correspondence to you a few months ago, I believe.
And sorry, you said that you do not have the personal authority to release the schedules?
No.
Okay, but the schedules, you do have possession of the schedules, correct?
The Ministry of Finance does have it.
Yeah.
And the Department of Airport Operations would have the schedules.
Okay, and as the public officer responsible for the Ministry of Finance, you would have possession of those documents, correct?
Yes, they would be in the Ministry of Finance.
Yes, and so under the Public Treasury Administration and Payments Act, the Public Accounts Committee can request any documents that are in possession of any public officer. In this case, the Public Accounts Committee has asked for the Airport Development Agreement, but you were saying that you do not have those documents to present, even though that agreement has been executed for a period of now 9 months.
The ADA has been signed, and I believe as the Minister of Finance has advised that currently the government is in negotiations with the Canadian Commerce Corporation and ACON, and a project agreement should be signed within the next month and a half. The terms of the ADA were laid out, and it is both parties agreed to confidentiality. So that's clearly laid out in the ADA, and if the minister signed off on a document where he's giving his side that whatever's going to be discussed is going to be confidential, and then obviously he goes and releases documents that are confidential, then obviously then it would be an issue. Because a lot of that information, as I laid out in my letter pretty clearly to you, it contains commercially sensitive information. So if that information is released, I think government could be in breach of the ADA.
However, there are provisions inside the Airport Development Agreement which specifically state that if the laws of the country require otherwise, the information can be disclosed, and if the Public Accounts Committee requests those under the authority of the Public Treasury Administration and Payments Act 1969, those would fall underneath those disclosure requirements. Do you not agree?
No, basically the legal advice that I have received, which was clearly provided to the Public Accounts Committee. I don't know if you shared the documentation with the rest of the committee, but that could be read out.
Feel free to read it. I mean, the public would be grateful for that information.
This was documentation sent to the Public Accounts Committee on behalf of the Bermuda government and myself. It was basically in confidence, without prejudice to any rights or arguments whatsoever. I am advised that Section 30 of the Parliamentary Act 1957, the Act, provides that the PAC, as you mentioned, may summon any person to attend before the committee and produce any document requested. We are aware of the importance of the issue and do not refuse disclosure lightly. Section 40B3 makes a refusal to produce a summon document an offense under the Act as subject to a fine of $840. We draw your attention to Section 32 of the Parliamentary Act 1957, which sets out the privilege of witnesses summoned to appear before a legislative committee, which by Section 2 of the same Act includes select committees such as yours. No person who, having been duly summoned, is in attendance before a legislative committee shall be required to answer any question or to produce any document which he will not be required, respectively, to answer or produce in proceedings before a court. And any such person shall, in respect of any evidence or the disclosure of any communication or the production of any document, be entitled to the same right and privilege as before a court. I have been advised that this provision grants to witnesses before a legislative committee the same rights and privileges they would have been appearing before the courts in legal proceedings. In particular, this would include an immunity to release any information which would be injurious to the public benefit, also known as the Public Interest Immunity, or PII. PII arises under the common law and has been expressly preserved in the context of court proceedings involving the Crown by Section 19 of the Crown Proceedings Act 1966 and by the Rule 24/15 of the Rules of the Supreme Court of Bermuda 1985. PII may be claimed specifically where the disclosure of confidential information will cause real or substantial harm to the public interest. The development agreement schedules contain very confidential and sensitive commercial information to both Bermuda and the development partners. In this particular case, the Bermuda interest would be engaged by the premature disclosure of information which would harm the government of Bermuda's commercial position in relation to entities in which it remains in active negotiations. The government must act prudently and responsibly to fulfill its erroneous obligations of confidentiality to all third parties, whether contractual, fiduciary, or at common law, especially in an international commercial context where the government's reputation as a reliable business partner is at stake. Section 19 of the Crown Proceedings Act 1966 addresses the rules of discovery of evidence in proceedings in which the Crown is a party. The proviso to Section 1 thereof makes very clear provisions, does not authorize or require the withholding of any document or the refusal to answer any questions on the ground that the disclosure of such documents or the answering of such questions will be against the public interest. Rule 24.
Hold on 1 second, sir. Is there a mic problem? Nope.
Switch it off. Try another mic.
Yeah, we can hear Wayne. Give him this. He wasn't talking to me.
I don't think so.
Yeah, just switch. You can have this mic.
Yeah, we got an extra one down here.
Okay. You gonna start singing one?
Yeah.
No, I was trying to. He's trying to mess up people.
Sorry, FS, please continue.
Rule 24/15 RCS similarly states that rules governing Disclosure in court proceedings are without prejudice to any rule of the law which authorizes or requires the withholding of any document on the ground that the disclosure of it would be injurious to the public interest. In summary, the government's position is that we are unable to release the schedules which would cause real or substantial harm to the public interest at this stage of negotiations.
Okay. So it is in your stance as the financial secretary before this committee representing the government, it is your view that the release of a contract which has been executed, which has been signed from August of 2015, which the government is currently engaged in numerous items underneath, and that contract not being in negotiation, it's actually in effect. And as you would know, money has been appropriated, money is being spent, and work is continuing on a daily basis underneath the base of this contract. But it is your opinion as representative of the government that the Public Accounts Committee should not be able to see the details of the very contract that the government is currently engaged in its work effort.
That's the advice, yeah, that's the position.
I understand the position, but I'm saying, would you admit that work is continuing underneath this contract, which was executed in August 2015?
Negotiations are continuing, correct?
That was not the question I asked, Financial Secretary. The question I asked is, do you agree that work is continuing or ongoing underneath the contract which was signed in August of 2015?
Negotiations are, and we have advisors, so are you talking about negotiations or hard capital work, or?
I'm saying any work at all. Is ACON currently engaged in work at the airport underneath the Airport Development Agreement, yes or no?
They've done some work at the
Okay,
airport.
so-
That's part of the ADA. When you get to the ADA, obviously, whatever work they've committed to, we would have to reimburse them. But on the flip side, we would have, we would be able to use, they did a geotechnical study down there, we would be able to use that. If for some reason we decide not to go with ACON, we could use all of the work. It will be a benefit to the Bermuda government when we go to redevelop the airport with another partner.
And that much is understood, but the question that I asked is, work is ongoing under a contract which was signed in August.
Yeah, under
Okay.
the ADA.
Okay, and the details of the ADA in the schedules, which are a very integral part because the ADA cannot be read without the schedules which you were saying are under negotiation, but there are clearly terms and agreements which were agreed under that ADA at the time of signing, which the government is proceeding upon, correct?
Yeah, the ADA clearly sets the framework to which this deal is going to go forward.
Okay. And so the definitions and interpretations inside of the schedules, which the Public Accounts Committee requires and requested in November, in order to get the full details to establish whether or not the government is going with value for money, you still maintain the position that the Public Accounts Committee should not have access to them.
Value for money is a whole different exercise. Government's committed through the entrustment to produce reports that show that this deal is going to be value for money to the Bermuda public. And without proving that to the FCO, this deal is not going to go forward. So we've got to write an evidence-based report that's clearly going to show, clearly has to show that this deal is value for money for the Bermuda government. So it's numerous checks and balances in place to ensure that the value for money criteria is met. And like I said, the ADA clearly lays out all of the obligations of ACON, Canadian Commerce Corporation, and also all of the obligations of government, which is clearly laid out.
Financial Secretary, although the ADA may clearly lay out, the ADA makes numerous references to terms and definitions that are included inside of the schedule, which have not yet been released to the public or the committee. So for you to say clearly lays out, we do not know what are in those terms and reference. So there are numerous things that are referenced inside the Airport Development Agreement, which we have no idea of. There's one point that I'd like to pick up on, in which you said that the terms of the entrustment require that a written and evidence-based assessment be provided. Can you please explain as to why that written and evidence-based assessment has not yet been provided?
Well, the first part, we had to get the agreement. Bermuda government and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office have to get agreement on the measures that need to be taken to address all of the gaps identified in the Deloitte report.
Has that happened yet?
Yep.
Okay. And is that planned on being published?
What do you mean?
Well, you're
First,
saying
we
that
had
you've
to get-
agreed, so I'm
we've
asking, will you be
agreed.
publishing
So-
what's been
so
agreed?
The agreement is just a letter from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to say that Section 6 of the entrustment has been met, and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office agrees with what the Bermuda government's going to put forward to close the gaps identified in the Deloitte report. So right now, we will get forward with officially producing the evidence-based report to show the value for money and all of the other criteria or gaps identified in the Deloitte report. This, it was some delays from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office side because the gentleman we were dealing with at first left the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, so it took a while to get them to agree with the list of measures we had laid out in a document to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I don't see why, it's no reason why that can't be produced.
Okay. So will you produce that? Will you undertake to bring that to the committee next
I
week?
don't think it's no issue next week. Yeah, I don't think it's no issue with producing the list of measures that the government would take to close the gaps identified in the Deloitte report that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office has agreed to. I don't think
Okay,
it's no
well,
issue.
I'll ask for an official motion from the committee for that later. However, of course, I still have an issue with the fact that we do not have access to the schedules. MP Fogo?
Good afternoon, Mr. Manders.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Thank you for coming. Listen, I've heard you allude to the fact of some type of stewardship being in place to ensure that what works are taking place at present are in keeping with the agreement that, or the schedules within the agreement that have not been shared with us. Can you speak to what types of things are indeed being done? You talked about the checks and balances that assures you that things are going along as they should be.
Well, I mentioned that before we even signed the project agreement, we need sign-off from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And like I said, we have to produce an evidence-based report to show that all of the gaps identified in the Deloitte report would be addressed. And with that, it's going to be a value for money assessment to say, okay, if we would have went out to an open tender, what would be the benefit of that? What would be the net present value of that procurement? What would be the net present value of the procurement option that we're taking now? Could government have borrowed the money to build a new airport? Could we have done nothing? So the evidence-based report is going to have to show all of the different procurement methods, and it's going to have to provide evidence that this is the optimal option for the Bermuda government.
Okay, you're speaking of what you plan on doing. I'm asking you what stewardship, what oversight is currently in place because works are taking place. What is currently in place to make certain that things, as they are going on according to the
All
agreement?
work, and it's not much work, we have a project manager that's overseeing all of the work that's being done by Acorn. Acorn have pretty stringent procurement processes, just like the government would have, probably even more stringent. So that work's being overseen by professionals. We have advisors. We have advisors, financial advisors. We have technical advisors that are going to oversee all of the technical work that they're doing at the airport. We also have legal advisors. So the oversight is there to ensure that the work being done is conducted at an acceptable level to the Bermuda government and people of Bermuda.
And in terms of the accounting processes, what have you put in place that is dealing with oversight as work is being done and as monies are being spent out?
Remember, we're not paying for the geotechnical work now. That's on Acorn's account. Obviously, we're paying for advisors who that would have been all approved by cabinet. But we wouldn't account for anything now. Nothing's going to be in government's books. If this deal falls through or government decides not to go with Acorn, obviously we're going to have to book a capital expenditure on our books, and we have a track of all of the monies that they're spent. And there's months of being verified by advisors.
Within government, not at the Acorn level?
No, our advisors. So within government, right? Not ACON level, obviously.
And to be clear, the advisors are whom?
HNTB, is the technical advisors, CIBC's financial advisors, Bennett Jones legal advisors.
Okay. So
Lee Fisher is a airport-specific advisor that DAO, Department of Airport Operation, have engaged. All of these have been engaged through Department of Airport Operations, going through the standard protocol of government procurement, and then you would have KPMG, who's the project manager. So,
Okay, so we have KPMG, HNTB, CIBC, Lee Fisher, and Bennett Jones, but not the Office of Project Management
And
Procurement.
project manager of procurement is overseeing the project in accordance with the Public Treasury Act. They sit in on, their role is to provide oversight, not manage the project.
I understand, but when did their oversight role begin? Because we heard testimony from the Director of Office of Project Management Procurement that they were not involved in the pre-contract negotiations.
They're involved now with oversight. They would ask for documents from Department of Airport Operations, myself, and other parties within government. They sit on calls with the team. We have a weekly call. The government advisory team would be the Permanent Secretary of Tourism and Transport, myself, and the project manager. They would sit on those calls. They would sit on the calls with all of the advisors. So they have been taking oversight role of the project.
Just before I move on to MP Souza, you say involved now. When did they become involved?
I can't give you the exact date, but they've been involved for months now.
4 months now?
Yeah.
But not prior to the contract being executed, correct? That was the testimony we heard.
Not at the level that they are now.
Understood. MP Souza?
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Financial Secretary Manders. Nice to see you on the mend from your little spill, and we appreciate you being here today.
No problem.
What I've heard in your testimony so far is that it's not in Bermuda's interest, the public interest, to release this confidential information of the schedules at this point, because it could jeopardize the project going forward. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And of course, what the PAC committee would like to know is that once you're in a position, that information will be forthcoming.
Yeah, for sure. No issues with that.
Okay.
Anything else that is publicly available, I can provide to the Public Accounts Committee. But at this time, the schedules contain confidential, commercially sensitive information.
That's an excellent question, because here's my confusion. Would the information not be commercially sensitive after the agreement is concluded? So what's the difference between now that the agreement's been signed and in the future? Would the information not be commercially sensitive at any point in time?
Well, if the information obviously comes out, where they're done a lot of work with traffic forecasts and things of that nature, if you release that information, obviously somebody else could use the information before we even sign an agreement.
But if there's but
business.
here's what I don't understand, FS. How can somebody else use the information if the Airport Development Agreement gives ACON the exclusive right to the contract of our new airport? They have the exclusive right.
Exactly.
So who would be injured in the case that that information, which was signed by the government, is released? Who would be the party that would be injured?
We
Bermuda.
would be the government, and it could be ACON. But, I mean, if for some, you could go back to the letter of agreement. Obviously, if we do not go forward with ACON, we pay them whatever's due from all of the work that they've done. The information becomes ours, and we move forward. But if for some reason we release all of the work that they've done with modeling, traffic forecasting, designs of the building, it would be inappropriate, in my opinion, for government to release this before definitive agreement has been signed.
I will go to MP Jackson. Are you fine?
Hey, what happened?
Okay. MP Wayne, do you have a question?
Yes, I did. I do. I'm getting back to the point that, Ms. Manders, glad to see your arm is getting much better. The public interest part, I think that's what our chair was just getting at. When you say it's not in the public's interest, who's the public you're talking about?
The public would be government.
The government is the public.
People, if government has a big suit and the reputation comes out, this is a international transaction. If for some reason government signs a confidentiality agreement with Canadian Commerce Corporation, and government can abide by that confidentiality, do you not think that that could
Well,
be reputational risk for
Well,
Bermuda
I
government?
guess the point is, why would you sign a confidential agreement when it comes down to the public wanting to know exactly what you're spending on their behalf?
I think,
These are the people behind you are taxpayers.
Yeah.
Who feels that they have a right to know what's going on before you initially put the final stamp on approval. Don't you think that's appropriate?
we've released all of the documents, the ADA.
The schedule's not been in.
The ADA it contains all of government's obligations underneath this agreement. Every single obligation that government has. I don't know if you read the ADA, but it lays out I don't know how much people read the ADA. Every single obligation that the government is committed to is in the ADA.
However, all those obligations are spelled out in the schedules under the definitions and interpretations, which have not been provided to the public.
I disagree.
Pardon?
I disagree. Every single obligation that the Bermuda government has committed to is in the ADA.
Okay, but the ADA contains the schedules as well. Section 1.1 of the ADA says that this is to be read in conjunction with the schedules. And inside of those schedules contain various definitions of interpretations. And those which are referred to inside the ADA, we do not know what those definitions and interpretations are. A perfect example is in the ADA, it refers to the target internal rate of return. Will you be able to share with the public today what the target internal rate of return for ACON is?
I'm sure it'll be in line with other airport concessions.
That's not the question I asked, Financial Secretary. Would you be prepared to share with the public today what is the target internal rate of return that ACON will be earning on the airport project?
It will be in line with other airport concessions taking on the same risks that ACON are taking with. We would have to show this. I mean, if you're going to see numbers, and if their internal rate of return is 20%, obviously that's going to be too high for a project of this nature where a company is taking on the construction risks and some of the air traffic risks and other risks. So the internal rate of return is going to be in line with what you would see in other airport concessions that the concessionaire is taking on this level of risk.
Well, there will be various arguments as to the level of risk which may be taken on, but I would like to return to one question, because following on what MP Jeff Sousa said and asked the question regarding the disclosure of the schedules, you said that this is confidential information. I'm trying to understand the government's reasoning between saying that we will release it in the future. Why don't you release it now? Why would you wait to release it in the future?
Governments deal in negotiations. I explained this all in my the government's written position that government is in negotiations, and after negotiations, then it could be released.
So I can understand
This could possibly have an impact on negotiations, with having a negative impact on negotiations on the government's behalf. It really can.
You can ask a question. Right. It's an agreement. Go ahead. MP Fogg.
Okay. Mr. Manders, you have the Office of Project and Procurement, and you have the Public Accounts Committee, both entities being considered watchdogs for government. You have all of these other private entities who were invited in to try and provide the stewardship, which you just testified to ensure that things are going to go in the best interest of Bermuda. Can you please explain to me why the two main watchdogs for government, who should be tasked with oversight to ensure, on behalf of the people, who are tasked with oversight on behalf of the people, to make sure monies are spent the way that they are supposed to be spent? Why do you think that we as entities would not be able to provide the, I guess you can say, the requisite oversight, or would do anything that is going to be so-called harmful to the government, when our specific purpose is to operate on behalf of government to protect it. I can't understand, I guess, the thinking that obtains with respect to that.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm asking, when you have all of these private entities that are allowed to be involved in a process and make decisions, the two government watchdogs that have the sole purpose of operating in a manner to protect government are not there to do their jobs.
We've provided significant documentation to the Office of Project Management and Procurement. We provided the ADA. The only thing that's not been provided is the schedules, and they were permitted, they're under confidentiality agreement. So I don't know what else you want the government to produce.
Okay.
Good afternoon, FS.
Good afternoon.
The ADA is not an agreement to enter into an agreement. It is a final agreement, correct?
Yeah, it just sets a framework to go into the project, to sign a project agreement,
Right,
which would be
and-
the definitive 30-year concessionaire with the construction of the airport and the running of the airport after that.
Okay. And this ADA confirms that the parties are going to proceed with the project?
Yeah, on a joint venture basis.
Right.
So it's a joint venture between Bermuda Government, Canadian Commerce Corporation, and ACON. It's not a typical procurement deal because governments agreed that this is the optimal way to develop the airport
Okay.
through a joint venture, not a procurement.
So could it be that they don't want to disclose the schedules because it is essentially a government-to-government agreement?
That's one of the reasons, and that's what I said. We've entered into confidential agreements with Canadian Commerce Corporation, ACON, and well, the agreement is between government of Bermuda and the Canadian Commerce Corporation.
Right.
And all parties have signed off to confidentiality. If someone from Canada goes and asks the Canadian Commerce Corporation to see any of these schedules, they're going to say no to. It's a confidentiality agreement. So they've committed to that. Government's committed to that. And it could be a reputational issue if we release this after agreeing with the Canadian Commerce Corporation, who's going to be the backer for the construction, to just release it. We would need to get their permission.
Right. Well, I have to agree with the chairman. If you're going to release the information at some point, I don't know whether or not the timing is really relevant. The other thing is that if we believe this to be the best deal that we could have garnered, then why are we hiding?
Yeah, it's not hiding. It's we're going to have to produce an evidence-based report to
Right.
say that this is in the best interest of government. If maybe the confidentiality agreement is between Bermuda government and Canadian government.
Right.
If I've asked my counterpart in CCC, and his view is that this is commercially sensitive, it's confidential, and the Canadian Commerce Corporation has no desire to release it. If they get asked, they're going to say no. So I've asked, and I'm sure other people have asked, and I got a firm no that we entered into this deal and we signed the letter of agreement with confidentiality terms. So we can't just release it. You know, I've asked, other people have asked, and their position is that this is commercially sensitive until the project agreement has been signed.
Right.
Rather, it's, the ADA, as I mentioned, shows every single commitment that the government is undertaking. Every commitment. It's obviously not got dollars terms attached to that, but that's going to come when you do the value for money. Right now, the cost of the airport is not 100% known. They're still working on the design. So to release information in the middle of negotiations could have a detrimental impact on the negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
Financial Secretary, before I go to another member of the committee, and of course we have financial instructions to deal with, which isn't leaving us much time, I have to ask the question, is the Airport Development Agreement the main part and not the schedules governed under the same restrictions of confidentiality as the schedules?
Say that again.
Is not the Airport Development Agreement, which has been released to the public, governed under the same confidentiality guidelines as the government is claiming the schedules have?
Yeah, but we got permission from the Canadian Commerce
So what you're saying is that,
to release the ADA. but-
so what you are saying currently is that the government of Bermuda will not release details of a contract that has been signed because the company that has not had to compete to get this deal is saying that we do not want that information in the public domain.
No, it's the Canadian Commerce Corporation.
The Canadian Commercial Corporation, as we all know, is the arm for ACON, who is the private company who will stand to benefit. CCC, as a government crown corporation, is not booking a profit on this deal. The deal will be booked by whoever ACON and whatever company that they decide to partner with in the equity portions. But what you are saying is that ACON gave permission to release the ADA, but ACON is not giving permission to release the schedules.
Canadian Commerce Corporation. I don't deal with ACON, I deal with government to government. The primary reason why government went into this was not because of ACON, it was back in that AAA-rated country, as the Canadian Commerce Corporation put forward to ensure that the airport is built on time, on budget, on
But Financial
on time.
Secretary, you can spare the talking points. The truth is that ACON is on island meeting with all the stakeholders here. CCC is not involved in meetings, ACON's involved in meetings. And if there's any commercial organization that is going to be impacted by this, CCC, as spelled out in the contract, disappears once the new airport is constructed. And the 30-year time frame is that belonging to ACON. So ACON has I guess would be the only party that could possibly be injured in this. So you were saying that the government got permission from CCC to release the Airport Development Agreement, but those exact same persons who gave permission for that, which is covered under the same confidentiality clause, will not give permission for the public to see what the government has signed.
No.
Okay.
And I've asked.
Okay. So
And
right now,
I'm going to say again that the relationship between Bermuda government and Ministry of Finance is between Bermuda government and the Canadian Commerce Corporation. That was the reason why government entered into this agreement, was the backing of the Canadian government.
MP Ferbert and then MP Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. What did CCC have over us that forced us to sign such an agreement?
I'm not sure what you asked.
Well, you signed it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Why did you sign it with such restrictions? When you said, no, you came to us and said just now, you said that you asked them that you would like to have some of the documents released. Why did you sign it?
Why?
Why did you sign such a restricted confidential agreement
Because-
so that people of Bermuda won't know what's in it?
Because of the commercially sensitive information in some of the schedules.
Well, at the very beginning, first of all, CCC said to us, said to the government, that they will go out and find the best provider of the service, correct?
Correct.
But based on the information that was released in the public, they passed the information to ACON and said, just fill out the document. We agree.
I'm not sure how that operates.
Well, it was in the public.
Well, I can't comment on that.
Well, it was in the public that CCC handed the information to ACON, and then ACON filled it out and handed it back to CC and then to us, the government. Why would we trust such an organization?
This is the Canadian Commerce Corporation.
That's my point. Why did we trust them? If we found out that there was devious and off base at the very beginning, why would we trust such an organization?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
And this is just the last thing, and I'll kick it off that. As civil servants, as we are aware, that there are ministers and there are civil servants. Sometimes civil servants do not agree with their minister. And the proper process is to fill out a document, send a letter in, and say, I do not agree with you, minister, put it on file. Are you telling me that right now that you agree with your minister on the way he's handling this right now?
Type of questions that.
It's straightforward.
I agree that maybe the deal is the best. It's a.
No. Do you agree that the information should not be released to the public? Do you agree that information should not be released to the public the way your minister does not want to release it?
Based on the confidentiality terms in the ADA, I don't think I have a choice to release it. I can't release it.
No. Okay, maybe I'm here. All right, that's it.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
I'll let MP Jackson go first, then MP Jackson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Manders.
Good afternoon.
My question, how long have we known about ACON? I mean, is this project that began now, is this the first time that Bermuda has ever had any interaction with ACON?
Yes.
From my knowledge, I haven't heard of the ACON before this.
Okay. My other question is this unusual for governments to partner for the development of airports? Is this something that's done on a regular basis? Is this a common procedure?
It's done. This was one of the reasons why government chose this, because CCC had built a similar airport in Ecuador using partnering with ACON and building an airport down in Ecuador. But the ministry and the minister looked at the government-to-government approach, looked at the CCC white paper, and thought that this was the ideal way to procure or to build a new airport without incurring debt on government's already encumbered balance sheet. But it's done. This government-to-government approach. CCC doesn't only build airports; they procure Canadian services to help countries all around the world. They've been doing this since World War II.
Are you aware of, not just CCC, but are you aware of how other countries tend to build airports, large infrastructure development like that? Do countries usually build them on their own and locally build, or do they partner with other governments or other large contractors?
Yeah, usually the way people are procuring now, the public-private partnership is, you look at a lot of big capital projects all around the world, is gaining popularity, where governments who's obviously taking on too much debt that they can handle are doing public-private partnerships. The hospital was, this is not Bermuda's first public-private partnership. The hospital was a successful public-private partnership, so we did have some experience, but governments are procuring, not the traditional way, but going through the public-private sector route. And with regard to the Canadian Commerce Corporation, I haven't seen any deal similar to this, where the full backing of the government, a AAA-rated government, is going to guarantee the on-time, on-budget, on-spec approval of the airport that we're going to build. It's no other, it's unique. Unless someone else could find a similar thing, this is unique, a unique way to build an airport.
Thank you, Financial Secretary. Financial Secretary, there is one point that I wish to make. You have compared it to the hospital project, but the hospital project the hospital is not privatized. It's run by the Bermuda Hospitals Board, unlike the airport, which we run by ACON and whomever else. So there is a distinct difference there. So I think that it's very important that the public is aware that this is not the same as the hospital project. The hospital was a build and maintain thing, a build and maintain project, and this is a build and operate project, which is certainly a different thing. Whereas the DHB makes a profit off of the running of the hospital. In this case, ACON will make a profit off of the running of the airport. So there are two.
Still a public-private partnership.
It's perfectly fine, but I think that the distinction
I agree with
is,
you.
thank you very much. I think the distinction is very important, and let us not let the public think that, oh, well, we did this with the hospital. There is certainly something very different. Question to you, Mr. Financial Secretary. When, in your view, is financial close scheduled to happen?
Later this year, maybe November, December.
Okay. One of the things that the Minister of Finance has spoken about is that the project needs to receive an investment grade. Have the rating services been down to evaluate the project as of yet?
They visited week before last, I think.
Okay, so you're saying that ratings agencies have been here to evaluate the project to assess whether or not it has an investment grade rating?
Preliminary.
Okay, therefore, it's clear that the project is proceeding. So we have a contract that we proceeded on for 9 months that the public does not have items. We're talking about items still under negotiation. But clearly, if an investment grade, if the ratings agencies have come down to give a rating on what is happening, clearly you have advanced to a point where there is significant progress that details should be shared. Do you agree with that position?
No, it's still a long way to go in the deal.
But so here's what I'd say. Let me rephrase the question. If the ratings agencies are looking at what you all have spec'd out thus far, is it fair to say that what you spec'd out is reasonably close to being complete?
It's still a long way to go before the project agreement has been signed.
That's not the question I asked, Mr. Financial Secretary, so let me try and ask it again. If the ratings agencies have been on island to examine the financial values or to make sure that this project gets an investment grade rating, is it not safe to say that you've pretty well advanced it because you would not be asked the investment agency, the ratings agencies to look at the project if it was still under negotiation?
This is still at the preliminary stage. The credit rating agencies haven't made any decision on whether this gets an investment grade rating or not. They still have more work to do because it's still more work to do with speccing the airport, designing it, putting a cost on it, and so it's a ways to go before the credit rating agencies can give a rating on this.
So why were the credit rating agencies invited if there's still a ways to go?
A preliminary visit, and the credit rating agencies would not be coming down at the request of government.
They'll be coming out at the request of?
The Canadian Commerce Corporation.
Or ACON, who's seemingly calling the shots and telling the Public Accounts Committee what they can see and what they can't see.
Two things, Mr. Chair. Firstly, Mr. Manders, you talked about CCC and that your negotiations took place, I guess, at that level. From research that I have done, ACON being under the umbrella of CCC, whenever in dealings they have had financial shortcomings, CCC has had to, I guess, if you will, pick up the slack for them. I want to know why Bermuda has entered an agreement where if there are financial shortcomings, the Bermudian government has undertaken to pick up the slack, so to speak. Excuse my layman terms.
I'm not sure exactly what you're answering, but
Asking.
asking, but the airport's obviously going to have a price tag.
No, we know that.
The revenue from the airport is going to fund the construction of the airport and the paying of the expenses and the debt. If you look at most airport deals that are done during this way, the passenger numbers have been above 1 million a year and have been rising. So if you look at our passenger numbers, obviously they've been on the decline for years. So that's a material risk. That's why government has to put something towards the deal to make this in the best interest of everybody. That's why in the ADA we have to commit to certain things, because this is not a CCC or ACON deal. This is a joint venture between the Bermuda government and the Canadian Commerce Corporation.
Did you want to
Sure.
ask a follow-up? Before I ask my second question, which is totally different, Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Farley had a...
Let them shoot.
Oh, okay.
MP Scott, MP Souza. And I neglected to announce to the public that the Speaker of the House has appointed MP Leah Scott to the committee. This is her first meeting, so welcome, MP Scott.
Oh, sorry. FS, I just have a couple of questions, just as a lawyer. Would you not think that...
It's a legal question I can't answer.
No, it's not a legal question, but in terms of being able to actually interpret the agreement, wouldn't you agree that at least the release of Schedule A, which is the definitions and interpretation, would not be harmful? I mean, I'd like to know what the regulated fees and charges are. I'd like to know what the definition of limited government support is. I'd like to know, there are a lot of capital terms in here that are not defined. And so in order to actually properly be able to interpret the agreement, you do need to be able to look at the definitions and interpretations. And I don't see what the harm would be at least in releasing that document and also Schedule I, which is the entrustment letter. I guess I could go along with.
Entrustment letter's been released, so that's released.
Okay.
So-
B through H I could understand in terms of, the charges and the drawings and things
Right.
like that. But you actually really do kind of need to have the definitions and interpretation to actually interpret the agreement.
I would have to, like I said, ask the Canadian Commerce Corporation, but that was not released. I mean, I don't have a copy of what was at table.
Right. I mean, because what's a required equity commitment? What does that mean? What, and
I
those
think
things, we can't interpret the agreement fairly or assess it accurately because we don't know what those definitions are.
MP Souza.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're getting to the end of your testimony, and of course, I've listened to you in the several testimonies that you've had in front of the PAC committee, and I just want to say I appreciate your openness and honesty, and can clearly see you're not reading talking points in front of you. I would like to ask anybody, if they don't know anything about the CCC, I didn't, as a Bermudian, and I made a point to Google it, and I learned, what an awesome organization this has been since the World War, and the projects they have been involved in, and it was quite impressive. And likewise, any of those that are listening would like to go and look online to find out more about the airport than just not knowing what was going on. And I appreciate the fact that CC is a AAA, and the guarantee that's in place. So I do appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
Do you have a question, MP Souza?
That's it.
Okay, no problem.
Statement like yourself.
MP, you have a question?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of AAAs around the world.
Good try.
And you can Google a lot of those organizations that you'll find.
But do they all for this project?
Well, you never checked it.
No,
Yes.
we checked.
That's a start. But
me one.
the revenue that you have said that the government will guarantee, and you talk about is the best interest of everybody. We don't know that. As far as the public right now, it's not in the best interest of us. And so how are you going to convince the public that's in the best interest of the public? Right now, is that in the best interest of the OBA? And ACON, sorry. I meant to say ACON, I said OBA, that was a mistake.
Yeah, because I'm an independent civil servant. As I mentioned before, government has to produce an evidence-based report to say that this is in the best interest, this is the best possible deal, meaning value for money.
Okay, so let me stop you there. So once you finish that, let me ask a question. Once you finish that, you're going to come back to the public and convince us that that's the best deal and no signatures that you move ahead. Is that correct?
The FCO will give their approval based on that.
I'm not worried about
That's-
FCO.
And Financial Secretary, let me correct you there, because that is not correct. I've personally met with Government House on this issue, and the governor has told me directly that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office will not be a judge as to whether the government of Bermuda, the documents of which it produces, are acceptable. They are not judging the documents which are produced, because if they were judging the documents that are produced, one would have assumed that those documents would have been produced already. So I don't want the public to believe that if this written and evidence-based assessment does not meet what the UK government has said, that the UK government will step in and stop the project, because the UK government has specifically stated that that is not what they will do. Continue.
But that's part of the entrustment. And that's to ensure that we do what, the government does what they have to do to ensure that the whole deal is value for money for the government and people of Bermuda. So that's the whole point
So I
of
ask again,
evidence-based report.
FCO, Financial Secretary, before you sign this final document, and you have confidence that what you've done the best for us, when you come to the public and say, here's the deal, and so you give a clear transparency on the airport, and then let the public decide what they want to do. Is that what you can do?
That's not my decision. I'll come before you and explain the technical intricacies of the deals and things of that nature, but that's obviously government would have to do that.
We advise them.
Yeah, and it would be based on solid numbers. I said it was going to be evidence-based report. It's not going to be what I said or anybody else said. It's going to be based on evidence. We've got to show evidence.
But you
that this
said
is-
early on, and this is evidence, you said something about to verify that all the information is in place, that you'd also be aware of if it was an open tender. Is that what's?
I didn't remember.
I thought I heard you say about open tender. We can check the files later on, but you mentioned something about open tender. So how do we know that we've done the best as far as price?
For one, you do extra due diligence. I said the Department of Airport Operations has tactical advisors. So when CCC Acorn puts the value of whatever the airport costs, that's going to be more heavily scrutinized than a tender process, because when you tender, obviously people bid and you get tension to ensure you get competitive tension. But when Acorn or CCC put forward what the value is, Department of Airports Operations Tactical Assistance, who's been around since 2007, would make sure that it's not excess profits in their numbers that they put forward.
Are you trying to say, from the financial secretary, that the lack of a tender and the lack of competitive tension may lead to a better deal for the government of Bermuda?
No, I said that you're going to have extra checks and balances because it wasn't tendered. You're going to have to do far more work than just going out to a tender, getting bids and letting somebody build it who might go over. You're going to do far more testing during this whole process because it didn't go out to tender.
And would you not accept that extra checks and balances should mean the review of the information as is required under our oversight capacity as the Public Accounts Committee? Do you not believe that that is extra checks and balances?
It could be, yeah.
But you don't agree that we should have access to that information?
It's not me. It's the agreement has confidentiality clauses in it. I can't breach the confidentiality clauses.
We'll go to MP Scott, MP Fogo, and then we'll move on, because I see MP Burgess is here.
Just excuse me for being naive, and this is my first meeting. Because it's a government-to-government transaction, does that allow an exemption from financial instructions to have an RFP?
No, we would have got a waiver from the Accountant General.
We didn't.
To the financial
bypass
secretary,
financial
this committee has heard testimony that the accountant general did not give the permission. That happened in November, which is the reason why this committee requested those documents. So we know that the government did not receive permission from the accountant general to enter into the Airport Development Agreement. We know that the accountant general wrote to the Ministry of Finance and did not get a response saying that he viewed this as a separate deal which needed his permission and he needed to evaluate the value for money.
Which he has done.
Which he did not do prior to the signing of the contract, which is what he testified in front of a committee. Are you saying that the accountant general has since reviewed and given his approval for?
Yeah.
Okay,
Didn't he come to you?
well then, I will then ask you, if you have said that he has since reviewed and given his approval for, I will, in addition to what you said you would provide to the committee, which was the steps that the government and the UK government have agreed, I will also ask that you would furnish the committee with the written approval from the accountant general that has been given, which was not present previously. Because the accountant general came to us in November 2015, and if you're saying that after November 2015, he has since given his approval, that is the first time that this committee is hearing about that. So I would ask, seeing that financial instructions requires that approval to be in writing, I will ask that you also provide that approval to the committee.
I explained this previously, that we had approval to enter into the deal, and that included all stages of the deal. Where the accountant general gave us initial approval, it was the minister's position that was the entire deal.
That's the ministry's position, but that is not the accountant general's position.
But then we've rectified that position, and now we're both on the same page.
Well, if you rectify that position, financial instructions requires that rectifying that position to be in writing. So I will ask that you can provide that permission from the accountant general in writing.
I think that's already been provided. Ms. Scott asked about financial instructions. So I basically, we had asked for a waiver from financial instructions. And remember, not every transaction could fit into financial instructions. I explained this when I came down
Financial
previously.
Secretary, not to interrupt, because I know that we have to go further. We've been over this many times. We've been over this when you were here in November. We've been over this when you were here before for MP Scott's benefit. What is public record is that the Accountant General came and testified in front of this committee that he did not give permission to the entering in the Airport Development Agreement, and he viewed it as a separate sole source opportunity. That was what started this ball rolling in the first place. What you have just said is that since which the Accountant General has given permission.
I was under the impression that he did when he came to you.
He testified that he did not. So what I'm asking is, has the Accountant General given permission in writing subsequent to his appearance in front of the Public Accounts Committee, where he shared documentation with the Ministry of Finance, and where he said he viewed the Airport Development Agreement as a sole source opportunity which required his separate approval? Has he given any written permission subsequent to that appearance in November?
I'm sure he has, because we
Okay.
provided significant documentation after that to satisfy his
Understood.
requirements.
So what I would ask, if you would produce that as well, in addition to the communication between the UK government and the Bermuda government. MP Fogo, and then we'll have to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason why I reserve this to the end is because, especially given the testimony that we once again heard here today, I feel compelled, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
given that last time we met, we had a vote regarding having a summons be issued for the information regarding the schedules. I feel compelled, and it was agreed to, I feel by majority at that meeting. I feel compelled to put that motion on the table again so that we can indeed have the necessary information so that PAC can do the job that we have been put in place to do. Mr. Manders, we definitely need this information, and we as a PAC, I'm sure the chair would agree, we can have this information in a private session. We are parliamentary officers, and as parliamentary officers, we are entitled to do things on behalf of the people of Bermuda that we believe is in the best interest of Bermuda. And so I would like this to be put to a vote, Mr. Chair, once again, because that information is vital.
Okay. MP Fogo has moved that the committee once again request, but in this instance, make an official summons. What I will say, in attempt to possibly to secure a unanimous vote of the committee, or at least a majority vote, I would ask if MP Fogo would amend her request that we request Schedule B, which is the definitions of, Schedule A, which are the definitions and interpretations, so that we can more accurately look at the Airport Development Agreement. Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion is that the committee will issue a summons to the Financial Secretary to produce Schedule A of the Airport Development Agreement, which has the definitions and interpretations, so the committee can more accurately review those, and those items will be reviewed in a private session. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Is there a second for that motion? Second from MP Scott. Is there any objection to that motion? There is seeing no objection, the committee shall issue a summons for these schedules, the definitions and interpretations, and will ask the Financial Secretary to produce that at our next regularly scheduled date of meeting. All right? Financial Secretary, unfortunately, it is 3:45, and we have not gotten to your wonderful note on financial instructions, so when you come back to see us again,
Yeah.
I'm sure hopefully we will discuss that. I thank you very much for your time, Financial Secretary. I wish you well on your recovery and healing, because I'm sure we want you to get back to training the young future stars of Western Stars as you do on a regular basis.
No problem, thank you.
Thank you, sir.